This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on international support for India in the fight against COVID-19. The participants are Ashok Sajjanar, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing the international cooperation which India has received in the wake of the second coronavirus pandemic which has swept India. The Foreign Secretary, Mr. Harsh Shringla, also briefed the media yesterday, and he pointed out that over 40 countries have reached out to India to help India meet its many emergency requirements. Ambassador Sajjanar, when we see this international pouring and we see this cooperation happening globally, how do you assess the situation, and also is this then a reflection of the goodwill that India has built for itself globally?
Yes, you're right, Simran, because when Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla, he says that it's 40 countries that have voluntarily and spontaneously come out to support and help India in this time of an unprecedented crisis and catastrophe. That definitely signifies outpouring of goodwill, because it is not only countries that have strategic partnership with India, not only United States, Russia, Singapore, Australia, Japan, and all the others. But there are countries which are maybe not so developed countries, not so rich, not so powerful, not so prosperous, but all of them have come out and they have offered their help. So across the board, the countries have come and are willingly and voluntarily offering supplies to India. As you said, it is a measure of the goodwill. Many of the countries have said that they are coming forward because when they were in need, when they wanted help and support and assistance, India was for them. So today, they also want to come in and support India when it is in such a difficult situation. President Joe Biden, when he was addressing the press, he said in the initial period of the pandemic, India came to our assistance, and now we are here for India.
Mr. Sajjanar, building on what we have seen is the reaction from the United States, and we saw that the first contingent arrived today, the US aid arrived today, and this has also followed President Joe Biden's telephonic conversation with Prime Minister Narendra Modi on April 26th, and the US assistance is likely to include emergency medical care units, oxygen-related supplies, vaccine-related supplies, and other therapeutics as needed. There has been a slight criticism that the US response was maybe a little hesitant. Would you give that analysis much thought, or would you say that things have actually flown pretty smoothly and the US has stood by India as a partner?
I think I would agree with a little with the assessment that was made, that maybe there was a small blip, there was a small stumble. What India would have expected that the United States would have come more readily and more actively to the support of India, both in terms of the equipment, the supplies, but also in terms of words of sympathy and support. So at the initial stages, this was not forthcoming. In fact, just about 10 days ago, on the 16th of April, there was an SOS that had been sent by the chairman of the Serum Institute of India, Adar Poonawalla, and that was addressed to the President of the United States, wherein he had said that we are in urgent needs of some raw materials and inputs for manufacture of both the Covishield, which is the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, and also Covovax, which Serum Institute would be manufacturing for Novavax, which has been manufactured, which has been created in the United States. So they need some raw materials, and those raw materials had not been forthcoming from the United States. So there was a little bit of a delay, but I don't think that it was an intentional delay. And once the United States realized it, they pulled out all the stops. There was no holds barred, and we had words of support coming in, starting right from President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, he spoke to his counterpart, Mr. Ajit Doval, and the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. All of them came out very, very strongly and said that we are going to assist and help and support India in every possible way. And that led also to the telephonic conversation between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, where it was mentioned that all support that is possible, then that the United States will be extending to India. And as you said, Simran, it includes oxygen generators, because oxygen is one item that has been in very short supply in India. So whether it is oxygen generators, oxygen concentrators, liquid oxygen, the oxygen cylinders, so all these will be coming. There are 2 plane loads that have already landed. A third plane load is coming. There is about 100 million worth of medical equipment are being sent by the United States. In addition to that, what the United States has also mentioned is that it has supplies of about 60 to 65 million AstraZeneca vaccines, which it is not going to use because it is in its own vaccination drive, it is using the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. So these are vaccines that the United States will be supplying to other countries. It will be to Mexico, to Brazil, to Canada, and to India. So India will also be able to get a significant chunk of these vaccines which are lying in the inventory in the United States. In addition to that, India would also be able to get the raw materials and inputs that Serum Institute of India had been asking for. In fact, those items had been put under some sort of a restriction, if not exactly a ban, by America under the Defense Production Act. The president had invoked the DPA, which is a wartime legislation which was enacted in the early 1950s during the Korean War, and which said that some of these items which are used by the American industry, by the US industry for its own use and production for the people of America, they would have the first right. So the requirement and the demands by the Serum Institute, they were not being fulfilled. So the decision has been taken by President Biden that these raw materials and inputs would also be provided so that the production of both AstraZeneca vaccine as well as Covovax, which India would be using in due course, that they could be ramped up and they could meet the requirements, again, not only of people in India, but people all over the world. You would recall that India started its own vaccination drive on the 16th of January, but then it started providing vaccines to the whole world, and it has provided supply to more than 80 countries, more than 60 million vaccines. So India's vaccination drive under the Maitri Vaccine Initiative is not only for use by Indian citizens, but as the Prime Minister mentioned some time ago, it is being used for the whole humanity and for whole mankind.
Pastor Sajjanar, as you mentioned about vaccine Maitri, and we saw how India had reached out globally, whether it was sending the vaccine, and at a point when the world faced a shortage of hydroxychloroquine, that time also India had reached out, and we see that the world is reciprocating today. We see that France is sending India help, as is Germany, the United Kingdom. So we see a lot of help from Europe also, and the fact that Europe itself is also struggling it's a difficult phase for them. Their corona cases are also on the rise. So in the middle of all this, as we see Europe itself struggling with the crisis, it is also taking this effort out to help India. How do you think this reflects on India's stature globally and the ties that India has built with various nations that in times of crisis, when we see UK, Germany, France dealing with their own crisis, Japan is going through hard time with the corona crisis, but despite their own domestic problems, they are standing with India, they are sending supplies to India, and it seems like international cooperation is the real fundamental going behind all this today.
This signals, and this is a testimony to the high respect and prestige that India has garnered over the years. This is a testimony to the goodwill that India has over the last, of course, many years, but particularly over the last 7 years, because we have seen the very proactive and the bold and the energetic foreign policy that Prime Minister Modi has pursued over these years, in terms of cementing ties, in terms of cementing relations. That is why, as you mentioned very correctly, Simran, that there are these countries, whether it is France, Germany, UK, it is Sweden, it is Japan, all of them are having their own lockdowns. All of them are having challenges to meet as far as the COVID-19 pandemic is concerned. But that notwithstanding, they are making sure that they supply to India, they send supplies to India. What is very urgently required here to deal with our once-in-a-century crisis, totally unanticipated, totally unexpected. And that is why what is of greatest urgency in India, all of them are flowing to India. And I think it's a matter of great satisfaction that all these countries, to the extent possible, they are doing, and it is reflective of the goodwill that India has been able to garner and the very strong ties of friendship, cooperation and participation that India has got.
Mr. Sajjanhar, we also saw that in the Quad meetings, that is the meeting between the US, India, Japan, Australia, the discussions for ramping up production in India for the corona vaccine were discussed, and it was decided that, India would step up its production capacities. How do you assess the success or the role that Quad has played as India counters the wave home? And going forward, how much can one expect from the Quad countries coming together in times of crisis like what we are facing today?
I think this is really a testing time as far as the Quad is concerned. Of course, in this context, the Quad is not acting and working together as one unit. That will happen, I think, going forward. Here, the Quad individual countries, like we've spoken about, how the United States is supplying about more than $100 million worth of goods and equipment to India. Japan is making its own contribution. Australia has also sent the first tranche of its support. So they are acting individually. But you are right when you say that on the 12th of March, when the Quad Summit meeting took place, then it was decided that technology would be provided by the United States and Japan. Also, funding would be provided by both these countries to India to ramp up its production so that we would be able to produce 1 billion doses of the vaccine by 2022. And this would be provided to countries in the Indo-Pacific, particularly as far as the ASEAN countries are concerned. So I think going forward, this has huge potential. I think this collaboration between the 4 Quad countries is going to be very seminal.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, another country that has really stepped up has been Russia. And we've already seen that 2 Russian flights with oxygen concentrators, lung ventilation equipment has arrived. And the Russian ambassador to India also tweeted that the Russian Federation decided to send humanitarian assistance to India in the spirit of the special and privileged strategic partnership between our 2 countries, as well as in the context of our anti-COVID-19 cooperation. How much does this strengthen the very age-old relationship between India and Russia?
So this is again testimony to the time-tested partnership. It is Russia is a key pillar of India's foreign policy, and this has been demonstrated once again. In fact, Russia was the first country to offer its assistance and support. And notwithstanding the changes that are taking place on the global geopolitical scene, Russia has come forward to support India. And this was again reflected by the very warm, cordial and useful conversation that Prime Minister Modi had with President Putin just day before yesterday. First of all, to thank him for all the support that Russia is extending. And also, it was decided at that time that the relationship would be elevated to the 2+2 level, which means that the foreign minister and the defense minister of both countries would be meeting each other. So this reflects that Russia is the only non-Quad country to have such a 2+2 partnership with India. This signifies that Russia is a very significant player as far as India's foreign policy is concerned.
And in the coming days, we will continue to follow the developments in international cooperation as countries stand together to fight this pandemic. With these thoughts, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on international support for India in the fight against COVID-19. The participants were Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News On Air. This program is also available on our website newsonair.com. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.